Now that we are at the top of the hour, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. I'm Alex Cron, Community Manager at Terentia, and I'm so glad to have you all here with us today. Helping to facilitate this webinar with me off camera is Lauren Turner, Terentia's Marketing Manager. Now, there's no shortage of dam systems out there. What's harder to find is a partner who truly understands the cultural heritage sector and stays invested in your success long after launch. That's Terentia. We are a collections and digital asset management system built specifically for GLAMP and nonprofit institutions, organizations managing complex collections, archives, media, and institutional knowledge. But what really sets us apart isn't just what we've built, it's how we work. From the very first conversation, we're in it with you, helping you think through the data migration, workflow design, metadata standards, and staff adoption. We know that the hardest part of any implementation isn't just the technology, it's the organizational change that surrounds that. So we don't just hand you a platform and walk away. We stay closely involved throughout every stage of implementation and continue as a collaborative partner well beyond that launch, because as your collections grow and your needs evolve, we want to be there for that too. Now, just a couple of things before we get started today. If you are going to be attending AAAM next month, ATOM or MAM this fall, please come find us. Come say hi. Terentia is going to be at these conferences, either in attendance or at a booth, and we would love to connect in person. Stop by, say hello, or if you want to talk through your dam or collections management questions, see the platform up close, or simply just put a face to the name. We'd love the chance to continue the conversation outside of the webinar session today. And if you'd like to have more of a dedicated time together, please don't hesitate to reach out ahead of the conference to schedule a meeting with us. We'd love to see you there. Now, of course, because this is a webinar, we have some other exciting webinars that are in the works, including a session with the Magnus Collection of Jewish Art and Life on September 16th. It's on implementing Terentia's collections management system to support managing their collections. And of course, the best way to stay in the loop of all of our upcoming webinars is to sign up for Terentia's newsletter. The link is going to be dropped in the chat. This is where we announce all of our upcoming webinars and share resources, including case studies, which you'll also see a couple in the chat today as well. You can also follow us on social media for updates there as well. So now I would like to introduce our speakers today. I am thrilled to introduce these wonderful people joining us for this conversation today. First, we have Jamie Fogel, Library and Archives Director at the Moat Marine Laboratory and Aquarium, where she oversees the Arthur Binning Davis Library and Archives. Jamie has led the selection and implementation of the Moat's organization-wide dam system, making their collections accessible to researchers, educators, and the public. Joining her is Audrey Mayer, Public History Director at the Civil Rights Institute, Inland, Southern California. Audrey holds a PhD in history and public history from UC Riverside and has spent her career building community-centered archives and oral history projects that bring underrepresented stories to light across the Inland Empire. We also have Jason Smith, Dam Administrator at the George Washington University Museum and the Textile Museum. Jason brings over a decade of experience in museums, archives, and photography, including work with the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress, with a focus on metadata strategy, workflow development, and expanding access through technology. And now bringing the vendor perspective from Terentia is Mylene Rusi, our lead implementation and project manager. Mylene brings over a decade of expertise in visual collections management across broadcasting, media, entertainment, and video games, and has led complex implementation projects across international studios. We are so lucky to have you all here today. Welcome. Now, I realize that I need to stop sharing my screen because we are going to launch our first poll. So to kick off our discussion, I take that back. I want to apologize. We're not sharing the poll just yet. There is a little bit of data that I wanted to share with you all first. So a quick snapshot of data from those of you who registered and are attending today. We asked where your institution is in its dam journey. So out of 260 responses, the largest group, 133 of you, said that you're just beginning to explore your options. 36 are actively evaluating or selecting a dams. 30 are already using one. 29 are currently in implementation. 19 are preparing for implementation, and 13 are launched and are working on adoption. So the majority of you are early in the process, and you're absolutely in good company. And for those of you who are already using a dams or have already launched and are now working on adoption, we will have some great insights for you as well. And now for our second question for the registration, we also asked about your biggest implementation challenge. Out of 228 responses, the top answer by a wide margin was limited internal resources and expertise, cited by 104 respondents. And of course, there was competing priorities, which came in second at 57, unclear expectations around who owns what at 35, and getting stakeholder buy-in and vendor promises not matching reality were tied at 16 each. These are not isolated pain points. They are consistent themes that we hear across the sector, and they are exactly the kinds of challenges that we will be tackling in our session today. So with that said, I jumped the gun a little bit. Now we are going to launch our first poll for today. So today's panel is really going to be a little bit more interactive. And so to start us off, we would like to hear from you all what it is that what are your biggest concerns that come when it comes to dam implementation? Is it migrating legacy data without losing context, cleaning up inconsistent metadata, getting staff buy-in across departments, defining permissions and access levels, connecting your dam with your collections management system, online collections, other systems that you might have in your infrastructure, sustaining dam governance after launch, or even limited staff time or internal capacity. Now, I believe we limited this to just a single choice because we really wanted you to think about what that biggest issue is or biggest concern is for you. And of course, if none of these options are relevant to you, please feel free to drop in your responses in the chat too. Cost to implement and maintain. Yep. All right. Why don't we go ahead, see if we can share those results. Excellent. So let's see, out of 124 of you who responded to the poll, and I'm reading this out loud for our recording, 45 of you said limited staff time or internal capacity. 24 said connecting your dams with your collections management system, online collections, or other systems. 18 said cleaning up inconsistent metadata. 16 said sustaining dam governance after launch. 11 said migrating legacy data without losing context. 8 said getting staff buy-in across departments. And 2 said defining permissions and access levels. Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. And it looks like we've got some other responses in the chat too. How to not replicate pain points from the old system in the new system. Selecting the right dams is the challenge. Yes. Okay. Yeah, there's quite a few ties here. Excellent. All right. So let's go ahead and move into our first panel discussion. And really, I'm posing this poll question in another way for our panelists today. Many technology implementations follow familiar rollout models, such as piloting with a small user group, introducing the system department by department, running old and new platforms in parallel, or even establishing a firm organization-wide cutover date. And from your perspective, I'd love to hear what makes implementing a DAMS in a cultural institution different from these more standard technology rollouts, and what additional organizational or even operational or cultural considerations need to be factored in.
Well, thanks for the questions and thank you everyone for being on today. It's great to see your own concerns, and I think that's something that all of us panelists on this can resonate with in terms of having gone through that same process ourselves. And Alex, I apologize, but to sort of get to the answer to that question, I wanted to give a little bit of context about my own institution, just because I think that really influenced the way that we went about doing this.
Please,
So
yes.
the Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California, which I will just call the Civil Rights Institute to save me some breath, we're really small. There are only four full-time employees, and I, as public history director, oversee all of our exhibitions, grant writing, and the archive. And so I think that was a big consideration for us, and I think is very common among cultural organizations, is the fact that we don't necessarily have just a designated IT department. There's so many folks in this sector that are wearing multiple hats. And so for a lot of like our considerations, it was like, what is something that we can do and we can maintain without a ton of staff resourcing, just because that's something that was so limited for us. And then as a part of that, I think is like the most important part of the difference between cultural institutions and sort of large technology is just the fact that we're stewarding and we are caretakers of such important materials. For our archive, we're very unique in the fact that partly because we're small, we are not a traditional museum in that we have physical collections. We use a post-custodial model, which means that we're often going out to folks' homes and looking under their beds, picking things up from their bookshelves and digitizing those materials. So once we've digitized them and put them into a dam, if something happens to those materials, we might not necessarily have access to redigitize. So in many ways, the access we're giving is limited, and we have to make sure that these objects are preserved because there isn't necessarily a backup. So that was really like a huge consideration for us when deciding to get a dam and then thinking about the system that we wanted. So I'll pass it off, Jamie and Jason, if you want to add in your own context and story.
Yeah, so I guess for our institution, um, when I came in, it was kind of different because everything was kind of set up for me. We had a dam system already started. Terentia was onboarded about a year before we started, so a lot of this was already in play. Um, but we kind of wanted to highlight a couple of things. We really want to highlight our collection, our photography, and we wanted to be able to give access to things that have never been seen before because we have a very large collection. We have several collections from GW, the Textile Museum, the Washingtoniana collection. So we have four or five collections, and we want to make sure that these will all be preserved and accessible. And we're doing this through the dams and Terentia. But at the same time, we want to roll out new technology through Terentia and through our exhibition. So we're really working on ways where we can reach out to our curatorial departments, to our education departments, and find new ways that it's not just a dam system, it's really innovating how we think of digital assets in terms of our exhibitions, in terms of our visitors, and in terms of our experience. And that's really what we're aiming for, like the future of the museum, not just the collections, but the audience experience. And that's kind of helping us fundraise a lot. We're really lucky because we're a part of a GW, we're part of a museum, a university that has funding. We have a large endowment. So we're able to try a lot of things and see if it works and see if it's something that we want to expand upon. And that's really allowing us to really push for some fun things that are coming down the pipeline that we're really just like, we'll try it, we'll see if it works, and kind of just seeing like at the end of the day, we're always preserving these digital assets through our Trencia system. Jamie?
Yeah, so obviously we faced some of those same challenges that both of you did as well. And then Moat Marine Laboratory, we're a marine science research institution. And then in addition, we've got a large education division. We have a public aquarium. And so the library and archives is like a drop in the moat bucket. Um, but we wanted the system to be used organization wide, but a lot of our departments kind of operate really siloed. So like we've got manatees and sea turtles and red tide and ocean acidification and coral and like all these things, and they are all off doing their important research. And so we wanted a system that would work for everybody and sort of become the central point for things. We wanted this to be our single source of truth. When you're looking for remote resources, it's in here, because they've always been really spread out in the past. So that was a huge consideration when we were selecting our system, is finding a system that would work for like these diverse needs, because it's not just archival stuff, and we've got marketing photos and we've got education materials, and we want to continue to, encompass all these different types of materials that are really diverse across our organization. So that was a big one.
Jamie, your conversation about like all of the different users and departments made me think of another sort of uniqueness of cultural institutions, at least for us, is that we also wanted to make this a system that was user friendly to our volunteers and interns, because as a
Mm.
small organization, like, of course, we're going to train staff, but then I'm not doing all of this alone. We have an amazing set of rotating volunteers and interns. And so we wanted something where we could have like the user permissions. Everything was fine. I could set in some volunteers to do some things without having to panic about a misplaced click. So I think that's unique, where a lot of other organizations and big institutions, they wouldn't necessarily be giving volunteers and interns access to systems like this. So that was a really big consideration for us too, is that we wanted it to be something that our community, sort of not just staff, but like the larger folks that like we serve and interface with us, could connect with and use with relative ease, and then also make sure that it wasn't, a risk to have them have that access. So I think that's also another thing that I thought of as you were talking about those key differences between our use cases.
I think something that played into why we ended up going with Terentia was that, we wanted a dam system that worked with the museums, worked for nonprofits, and Terentia really did that. They understand where we were coming from and why we had certain rules, like related to copyright, related to researchers, related to faculty, and they were really able to understand, like, okay, what does your institution mean when you're talking about copyright? Because where you have textiles that are older than the United States, so we have a lot of artists that we're working with. We have a lot of students that have come to us to do research. So we have all of this that we need to be able to have a damn system where it can handle those research requests, and we can handle the copyright concerns as well. So it's really to have a team that's flexible and to help us develop as we're changing. Because there's been so many meetings that I've had with Alex and Mayland and Neil where I'm like, hey, I know I said this a week ago, but we need to change this because I read something or I talked to one of my staff members. And one of the things that I've kind of learned throughout this process was it's like you really have to sit down with each staff member and really talk
Mm.
about their needs. Because our director, John, he said he has very big, great ideas, but after then go to our education staff member to talk about what she wants to do with her researchers and her her sorry her her students, and try to get a sense of how at the GW we can kind of really get a sense of like what we can do for the overall institution. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, fantastic. Milan, is there anything you would like to share from the vendor's perspective?
Yes, I think it touched a couple of points that I have in my note here. Well, it's first at Terentia, we know that not two institutions are alike. And this is why we have an implementation framework that is not rigid. It's not a one size fits them all. It's a flexible structure, and we specifically want and are trying to adapt specifically to the unique resources, the operational velocity, but also the current reality of every institution. Um, we don't believe that forcing someone to fit into a mold will work. And we always need to remember that we just don't implement technology, but we implement something also for people. And that's really at the center for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final thoughts before I move to the next question? Yeah, fantastic. All right, so this next question is a bit of a two-parter. so bear with me. I'd love for each of you to walk through with us a bit at the kind of a high level what implementation looked like at your institution. Um, and the second part of that question, and you can answer it in all one, is what were the biggest decisions, turning points, lessons learned as you moved from planning to actual active use, active engagement with the system?
I'm happy to share first. So as I mentioned before, the Civil Rights Institute, it was a really small org. And so when I came on board, the institute had only been open to the public for 1 year. So we're also relatively new. We're right on the corner in a busy area in Riverside's downtown area in California. And so I like to say we're the new kids on the block. But there really wasn't a lot. From the very beginning of conceptualizing the Civil Rights Institute, our founders wanted there to be a place for archival materials because so much of our civil rights and social justice history hadn't been preserved. And so folks had already been bringing things, and there were some very messy Excel spreadsheets with some very preliminary metadata when I first came in. And all of the files were like across different computers and there were different like versions of the same folder from the same collection. And so I sort of came in, was like, okay, there's a lot going on. But my real big focus as coming on as public history director was making sure that we had a dam because I was so worried about these items disappearing because already we had scanned materials from folks in the community who had passed away. And so we didn't know with the estate, like where those photos had actually landed, because it was done really early and there wasn't the same sort of protocol of being in contact with the families. And so I was like, okay, we need to make sure that these are fully safe. And we were very lucky to be able to get some funding to support putting together an archive, but we also knew we're very small. We're just starting. We don't have unlimited finances, and so we looked around for a lot of different solutions, but what we liked about Terentia was that it was CMS, DAM, and collections online all in one system because I knew personally as one person, I wouldn't be able to maintain all three of those and the other parts of my job and still maintain my sanity. So we were able to work with a really great sort of like local archive sort of advisory committee. And then we have a board exhibition committee that sort of helped us, narrow down the options and make the final decision. And it was so helpful to have the support of Terentia staff because I knew, again, that I wouldn't be able to do that full implementation by myself. So it was a lot of taking the old metadata sheets and actually inputting all of that info and also mapping the fields. And that was, I think, my biggest like lesson learned is because there were so many things that had been done with the metadata in the, CSV sheets that I almost had trouble before being into Terentia, imagining what we could do with actually now having a relational database. Because that was like, I was like, no, I want the identifiers to be like mixed, like numbers and characters, and then that ended up being a whole thing because then we couldn't sort by them. I'm like, oh, well, now like there's certain issues that I was running into with the sheets that I don't in Terentia, and it's allowed us to think more broadly about what these fields can do and what we can do with our subject terms. And we're actually continuing to do a lot more of that thinking. We are very fortunate to get some Mellon Community Archive funding to support a long-term archive intern who is actually right now investigating how we might redo our subject terms and thinking through that. And so I think the biggest benefit has been thinking through that we don't have to be boxed into the small system we have, and we can really think bigger, even if we are a smaller organization. So yeah, I think that's the general overview. I can always go into more detail, but I'll pass it on to my co-presenters.
Yeah, so at the GW Museum, Textile Museum, so implementation kind of happened prior to me getting here, to a degree. So uh, our director had a meeting with Neil, and so they got together to kind of talk about Terentia and what they would provide. So they bought the system prior to me starting. Um, and then the next big step was getting my boss, the registrar for the museum, and our director of communications, really leading the charge. But the biggest thing besides that was really getting buy-in from all of the staff. This was one of we had on board from everyone was on board. So our museum is we have our staff is big but small. So we have about 20-ish, 25-ish staff members, but we have about 20 to 40 students depending on the time of the year. And so it was really about getting everyone's buy-in to really get the system. But then I came. So with that came some structure on metadata, some changes on implementation, and really getting that up and running. So the biggest decisions that we made between really my boss, our communications director, and myself is really like what files go first. So we had two big collections that were about 300,000 files. So that's our collections photography. Thank you, Brett. And our communications photography, which is done by a variation of GW photographers and our student photographers. So we really wanted to focus on these two collections because they're the most used. So we're really going at that, providing metadata, providing structure, and getting those assets into the system. From there, we hired, and I feel like I'm hiring students every other day to really help implement these metadata structures for these assets. So we've had about I think we're at 6 students working on these collections. So we
Wow.
really can't do it without their help and the additional
Mhm.
staff with CM, sorry, with the collection staff, our communication staff. So there's a ton of people already working on this material outside of me. So again, this is a ton of work that the museum is already working on because of this buy-in from top. So it's just a lot of decisions that were made because of this buy-in from the very top. But we're also deciding on the future where we're working with education to get these assets in front of the public via either online with educational content on the website or in the exhibitions itself, which the curatorial staff is working on and the exhibition staff is working on. So everyone is involved in this institution because that is our way forward with Terentia. But in terms of lesson learned, the one thing I realized is that we had to really focus on staff training. So, Jamie, thank you. We decided to build a website to just train people on how to log into Terentia, how to upload assets, just the basic stuff so that they can bug me as a DAMS admin, but they can also just go to a website just so they don't, because some people just they might think I'm too busy. And I'm always have time because they're my coworkers. I always have time for them, but sometimes that's just easier for them. So the videos,
Mhm.
training. So it's really just like you have to have a DAMS admin to do this work because it's not like someone can do it 5 days, 5 days a month. You need a permanent person. So really training staff members was very important to us. Another thing related to collection was copyright. We really wanted to make sure that we can handle and secure our copywritten assets in Terentia. So we're working on that via an image ticketing uh, system request. We're still working on early stages, but we're getting there. And then we're really just future planning with some of our exhibitions and content creation. So there's a lot of lessons learning that we're currently doing, but everything's going really good. So we're doing great.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that it is like I'm still learning too. Um, so implementation, first I should say that we did get some staff buy-in during our selection process. We had meetings with different people. I think we had almost 20 meetings with different departments across the organization to kind of learn about their needs. And then we selected Terentia. And so then we were like, guess what, guys? That thing that we talked to you about, it's happening. Um, so which people were pretty excited about, but then you're like, okay, now we have to train you how to use it. Um, so I will say implementation was a lot of spreadsheets and planning and thinking about how we organize materials. And so my co-system admin was in the communications department. So she and I even just had like terminology that like I'm used to calling it subject headings and she wanted to call it keywords. And I'm used to formatting names this way and she like prefers to format names this way so that way you can copy and paste it into the photo caption and things like that. So we had a lot of like things like that to work out. Um, So yeah, it was a lot of spreadsheets, more spreadsheets than you think, but it's a lot. It was obviously it's good to be like forward thinking and not how are we using it now, but how do we expect it to grow and how do we hope people are going to use it and what makes the most sense, that sort of find people where they are. Um, so for training, we did staff trainings that were available to everyone. Um, and then once we hit a point that we figured that most of the people that were going to like self-select had already attended a training, then we started going department by department and trying to catch all the people who maybe we haven't caught. And then it's actually probably time to start figuring out like what the next phase is.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you guys have any ideas, let me know. And then as Jason mentioned, we did develop a staff training website. So that we, these are our moat guidelines for how to use the system. So, when you're uploading a photo, these are, this is what these fields mean, or, because sometimes you have people who are in the system and using it every day, and then you have someone that uses it twice a year. And so just like, hey, here you have this site to reference, how to do this. And of course, you can always come back and ask questions, or I'm happy to set up more trainings for people, but they always have that training site as reference. Um, so yeah, and then we have two system admins, myself and one of my coworkers, and then we also have like area admins. So like
Mm.
someone in communications oversees the marketing photos, and someone in education oversees the education materials. Um, Obviously, in addition to being a system admin, I oversee the archival materials, and that type of thing. And that helps just kind of build out the team because, of course, one person can't can't have eyes on everything and make sure that people filled in all the metadata and all that kind of stuff. So trying to build that kind of team of of champions that help manage the system.
Love that. And I also love the community learning from each other too, that you and Jason have both just really emphasized there. So I just wanted to highlight that a little bit. But before I move to our next poll, are there any final thoughts?
No, if I can jump back in though, that was actually another reason why we did really like Terentia is that when we were first talking to everyone and Neil was talking about we want it to be a community, and I was like, yes, that's such a great because we all have such good ideas, but we also face the same struggles. And as different as our organizations are, if someone's got a great way of doing something, like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah,
So that being said, haven't talked to anyone if you have questions later.
I love that. Thank you, Jamie. Milan, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, same
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I was going to say, like implementation is a heavy lift. Sometimes it goes fast, and sometimes it's an elongated process. And we know that it's usually a stressful moment also for some of the staff. It does involve change management. So technology is the tool, but you also have to manage with the human side. And we like to be there for our community also to bring them some tools and try to make sure things will be fine and what they expect. But we're also conscious that, well, if we're being honest, not everything goes exactly as planned. Um, but we're trying to make sure that we are trying really hard to make things as seamlessly as possible for our client.
Oh, and if I could add one more thing, when we
Please.
did the trainings, the in-person trainings, we also made sure there was snacks and we gave people swag. Because it's like you want people to be receptive to what you're showing to them. And there's like, who doesn't like snacks and swag? It puts you in a good mood. So those my other tricks.
I love that. And Michelle in the chat put snacks are important. Snacks always work from Zach too. Yes, I love that. Excellent. All right, we're going to go ahead and launch our next poll, which we are wondering if what is currently making digital assets difficult for you to manage? And again, this is this time this is multiple choice. So Please select all that apply or drop in the chat if there are if you don't see a response option that is relevant to you. So the options are assets are scattered across storage locations. It's difficult for staff to find what they need. Metadata is incomplete, inconsistent, or unreliable. Rights and permissions are unclear. Different departments use different workflows or systems. You lack a clear system of record, or you have a dam already, but adoption is uneven. I'm really curious, and we do these polls because we really love data, and I know you all love to see how everybody else is dealing with these challenges too. We'll do a little write-up after this webinar that kind of summarizes all of the data points from the registration questions and these poll questions as well. All right, we'll just give it a couple more seconds and then we will share those results with everybody. Just want to make sure we give everybody enough time to respond. But we could have selected all of the options. Yeah, absolutely. This should be multiple choice poll. So if all of the options apply, please select them all. All right, why don't we go ahead and share those results? Fabulous. So out of 125 responses, or sorry, attendees, let's see, our top selected is metadata is incomplete, inconsistent, or reliable. That's 95 of you all said that. 73 said assets are scattered across storage locations. 55 said different departments use different workflows or systems. I would have thought more would have said that, to be honest. 54 said it is difficult for staff to find what they need. 51 said rights and permissions are unclear. 35 said we lack a clear system of record. And 24 said we have a dam, but adoption is uneven. Interesting. Okay. Go ahead and stop sharing those results and we'll move on to our next panel question. So we can see from the poll responses, many cultural institutions are dealing with scattered files, legacy systems, inconsistent metadata, limited staff capacity, and different departments with different needs. I'd love to hear from you all, which of these challenges really had the biggest impact on your implementation and how did your teams address it?
Inconsistent metadata was a really big problem for us because there was a lot of different interns working across a lot of different spreadsheets with, not really a lot of like attention paid to the work that they were doing and the training. It was really messy. Alex, you might remember when you were helping us add these to the system. There were some where like it was really beautiful, and then other times like the subject terms were all everywhere. And I think one of the things that was so exciting about using Terentia was the availability to have more of a relational database, because we were trying to keep our subject terms consistent by just having them on a sheet and folks were supposed to copy and paste. But we know what happens when we ask folks to go through multiple steps like that. So being able to have the system as that sort of like, I think Jamie, you might have said the same phrase, like the single like source of truth, was really helpful, because that's something where then I can go into the back end. If there's ones that pop up that shouldn't be there, I can remove them and then also see where they've populated throughout the system. So having this system and also being able to utilize the materials that Terentia gave us for training to then pass on and create a very specific workflow for our interns and volunteers was extremely helpful. There's, again, we're human. There's going to still be mistakes, but I feel like the system has been has helped make those mistakes more visible and easier to fix, especially being able to make some of those global changes that were a lot harder to do across our previous systems. And that was really a huge benefit for us, especially because we don't have the staff time to have, constant monitoring of our volunteers and interns and what they're adding in. Usually there's a lot of training up the, front end, and then we sort of, you can't focus on and review every single item all of the time. And so being able to more visibly see these errors and then to correct them was really important for us. We're still there are some things that we're continuing to work on, like getting some particular like formats and accessibility, and we've been really pleased with how receptive Terentia has been to our requests of like, okay, we want to get VTT and SRT files for captions and accessibility. That's something that's still in progress, but being able and willing to go on the journey with us, I think, has been really helpful so that the getting into implementation, it's more of like a team building versus something where like we're feeling we have to like beg or ask for things. So that's been really, really great in terms of like being thought partners and making the system better. That's been really important for us, again, because I don't necessarily have the time to do all of these things myself. So being able to have Mylin to do and think through some of those issues has been really helpful. So I think for us, it was really the inconsistent metadata, which is still going to continue to be a little bit of an issue, but now being able to have these systems to help us curtail the amount and be able to make those changes faster has been really important for us.
Yeah, I think this question is kind of hard to kind of answer because we're still like in the implementation phase of just like gathering all of our collections. Because right now we're really just moving all of our collection assets over to Terentia, and as of like last night, thank you, Malin, we're moving our data from Museum Plus, which is our CM at the Textile Museum, to Terentia. So we're waiting to see how that goes and then seeing what we need to fix. But Terentia has been really, or you all have been really flexible and like working with us on that end, in terms of cleaning up metadata and prepping the data prior to it getting into the system. So ask me in a couple months. Um, but the way we're kind of rolling out is we're rolling it out by division. So like I am planning on, and I know what's coming, but we're really focusing on the collection first and these collect and these communication/event images, and they're a lot easier. But we're building on a lot of work that's already been done. Because we're at GW, we were able to have uh, what we call box, which is based like Dropbox, but within that, it we have a lot of metadata that's already built in, because of records that we have kept. Our communication director has a massive Excel sheet of all of the events that we've had of the last 10 plus years. So we have people's names, dates, locations, titles. So we have all that metadata that we can just pull into Terencia really quick. So we have a ton of students working on that. So that metadata is there. And then with Museum Plus, we have our collections metadata as well. So all of that's coming together. So at some point, everything is going to connect. And then we're going to be able to bring in our education, our curatorial files, our library files, but we're not there just yet, but soon. But again, with us, because this is still a new process, this is like a multi-year project. So we're getting there.
Yeah, we definitely still we had some materials that were moved in right away as part of our initial implementation, and I still have another batch of materials that's waiting to be moved in. It's definitely a slow rollout. That is actually probably the best advice I could give to anyone currently doing their research or about to start implementation. It'll take longer than you think. Patience is not one of my virtues. So I would be like, yes, we're gonna get this done. We're gonna be ready to go in like a month. And then, like 6 months later, you're like, soon. We're gonna get there soon. Um, so but I would say so of the poll questions, I could have checked all of those boxes. We have and or still have all of those issues, of course. Um, and definitely limited staff capacity is is a problem as well because although Terentia replaced like the system we used to use for marketing photos and is replacing our old digital collection site, it also is still something added that like not every department was doing before. Um, but you know, myself and my co-system admin, we just tried to kind of set a dedicated time, um, and set goals like I don't either for the week or the sprint or the month or the quarter, and we would say, all right, by the end of this quarter, we want to add 2 new asset types, and by the end of the year, we want to have had 7 more trainings. I'm making up these numbers, but and just kind of keep going. And that's all right. Well, this week, our dedicated time is a training. And then next week, our dedicated time is we're going to sit through and just work on uploading some materials. And the week after is our next planning session and that kind of thing. So yeah, just try and carve out a little time, make it a regular thing. And then that also helps kind of in the higher ups when you make the case of like, no, this is important and we need to allot time for this, and then it gets sort of built into your role that that's a regular thing and not an added thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Malin?
I will say that we know that institutional life doesn't stop because there's an implementation. So, and sometimes something happen, you have to pause a project and restart it a little bit later, or different things can happen. So, if your reality change, whether it's a major exhibition opening, a building renovation, or any other priority, we know when to build and pause also during our implementation process, because we want to be good partner in that kind of project, and we want to respect the rhythm of our community as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you guys have been great. And that's actually why we still have some materials that we've not transferred in yet. We had to take a pause while we worked on Moat's new website, and then we opened a new aquarium. Um, and by the way, Moat's website we built a connection with Terentia, which was really exciting, but obviously that was very timely.
I have an integration question for you all, but we won't get to that just yet.
Yes. So, yeah, you guys are great.
I love it. Okay, so we're gonna move into our third poll for today, and this is about staff adoption. I know we've kind of talked about this already, but I'd love to hear from everybody attending what they think the biggest barriers to staff adoption to a new DAMS are for their institution. Is it that staff are comfortable with already existing workflows? Is it a lack of time for training, unclear ownership or accountability? The system feels too complicated. Departments have different needs and expectations. Staff don't trust the data yet because of, again, that inconsistent metadata that needs to be cleaned up? Or is it leadership support is limited or it's inconsistent? And I don't know about you all, but probably a lot of these would be this is a single choice one. I'm sorry. I know folks would probably want to be able to select more than one response, but we'd love for you to prioritize what the biggest barrier would be. I'd even love to hear from the three of you what the biggest barrier was for you.
I think for us, because we have a small staff, relatively speaking. I know I used to work at a museum where there was only one staff, and I was just director. Um, so we have a lot of staff that are doing a lot of different things and managing a lot of students. So it's like, how much time do they have for this? So that's a challenge of it. And like, we also have a ton of assets. Like we have just from our collections photography and our event photography, we're talking about 500,000 assets as a whole. So it's like,
Mhm.
how do we manage all of that and get those assets out there? Because they're all very great material that we want to share with everyone. But we also have to protect those assets because of copyright information, et cetera. So it's just really trying to balance that and just making sure that when someone sees a new system, they're not intimidated. They know what they're getting into. They are comfortable coming to me. They're comfortable going to the system. So it's making sure they're comfortable and making sure that they have the tools to succeed.
All right, why don't we go ahead and share those results with everybody? Excellent. Okay, so out of 110 people who responded, see our top response is 31 folks said that the system feels too complicated. 20 people said leadership support is limited or inconsistent. Let's see, 19 said lack of time for training. 15 said departments have different needs and expectations. 14 said staff are comfortable with existing workflows. 7 said unclear ownership or accountability. 4 said staff do not trust the data yet. And of course, I see some responses here in the chat too. Is cost being a barrier? Yes, absolutely. I love Kevin's response. Biggest barrier is Dropbox.
I like secretly tell everyone I'm like I'm gonna turn off Box. So I'm like, look, I'm not gonna do that. I know some of you are watching, don't worry. But I'm just like, I need you to be Terentia first. Because like it's not just turning off Box, it's about everything else that comes with the dam system that connects everything. And that's really what a dam system does, is it allows you to connect the dots and allows you to find the material that you wouldn't find in a traditional box. And that's really the strength of your all system.
Yeah, and we're Google based, and so people have things in Google Drive, but then that staff person leaves, and then you can't disable their email account because you don't want to lose the stuff that's in their Google Drive. Like it's the whole thing. And we're like, yes, that's why we put it all into Terentia now. At least
Oh,
that's the goal.
There's another great one from Jennifer in the chat. A years-long legacy of siloing of information between departments and staff changes. Yes, absolutely.
One of the challenges that we ran into was that folks just didn't really know what a dam was. In terms of like leadership and board, they're like, we want our collections online. We're like, yes, we do too. But also, we want to make sure that those collections, once they're online, are going to be safe and also preserved. And so, a big thing for us was being able to manage file obsolescence because, again, single person, I can't do all of that work because it can be done by individuals, but we knew that by having a system, we'd be able to do that. And so it was sort of like we sort of did a reverse of like, see, Trench's collections online, but then also there's a dam, which is really important. And, through a lot more like discussion with our board, sort of bringing them alongside, like showing them as we were integrating Terentia, like, this is what the collections online will look like. This is what we're doing, I think helped give more buy-in to something that they didn't necessarily understand to begin with because a lot of folks are like, oh, well, you don't have to worry about the preservation of digital things. They're going to be fine. But when we're looking at like the possibility of a digital dark age, it's like having that safety and being able to have someone else in another system run the checksums and do that work was so important to us because we really wanted to maintain the integrity. I had worked and experienced with community members wanting to donate items to the collection and we can't open them because they're like super old Illustrator or all these crazy files that just we can't access. And so we really wanted to make sure that, through the system, but also through our own policies, we were not going to run into those problems in the future. And I think now we definitely have more folks that are on board, but a lot of it was education about like what a dam is and also how precarious born digital and digitized items can be. And then having that more of that awareness at the institutional level has been really helpful for continuing the work of implementation for us.
Absolutely. Okay. We're ready to move on to the next question? Yeah. All right. So after you all have already touched on adoption a bit already in our conversation. And I just kind of would like to revisit and expand a little bit on what other practical steps you might want to share that helped your team build that momentum during implementation, if there were any particular strategies that you found especially helpful. What had to happen for the dam implementation work to remain active? Again, when you have all these, competing priorities in your institution, and if there was anything specifically that you had to postpone or be phased, or even if you had to pause the implementation.
Yeah, I think I can. So this one was easy for us because being at a fairly big university that has a museum studies program, we can hire students. I've hired since what was that? November since I started. I think we've hired six, give or take, students that have worked on this system a little bit more. And all of our staff are just used to hiring students and they'll just do the work for us. So by that, I mean, they'll ingest the files, they'll check that the files are there, they'll update the metadata, they'll work with our staff to be like, one of them will just like go in there and just like make sure the spelling for our words are correct. And a lot of that would normally be done by our communication director. She's too busy to do that. But a student can. So that just saves hours and hours and hours of time. Um, and that's one thing that's helping us a ton is that we just have the ability to hire students and that we have management and our director who is just okay with just saying, hey, we need another student today. And they're like, go ahead, hire somebody. I'm actively hiring another person right now. So we do that a lot at GW. But another thing that really helped us was just like being my only job is to work on the dams at GW. And I can just sit down and be like, hey, I need you to ingest these files. Let's sit down, go through the process, and then see what's the stall, and let's try to fix it. And just really like that buy-in of like one-on-one training that you can do when it's my sole job has really helped a ton just get staff buy-in. Because at the same time, I can talk to other units, be like, hey, you're next. You're next. What do you need? So I can prep the system for when it's your turn. And then they can start thinking about, oh, hey, I want to do this because our director wants to do something with our students. I'm like, okay, we can work on that. I can go talk to Terentia. We can start building stuff out. And then I'm already two steps ahead of their department when it comes to their turn. And that has helped a ton of just getting buy-in. And really, for me, you can't do implementation without two things. Buy-in, what three things? Money, obviously, buy-in, and a DAMS admin. And I know those are all tough to get because the reality is some institutions just can't afford to hire staff, but it's tough. But I also know like it's a lot of work, but it's good work. At the end of the day, you'll see the results.
I sort of talked before about like what it took to like get external folks, like external to me, I guess, interested in like doing and investing in a dam. But for me, in terms of what helped me sort of like be trusting that like okay you made the right decision, this is okay, was a lot of like the early trainings because I think in previous work that I had done I was used to being sort of nickeled and dimed for a lot of the training and support, and so it was really great to have like weekly check-ins and then like consistency in terms of like checking in and training and when I needed something actually having someone directly to work with. So I think that was really helpful in terms of feeling like I wasn't necessarily alone in the implementation since I was the primary staff person and we are so small. So I think that was really helpful for like building up most like the familiarity with the system. Also realizing what it could do sort of outside of my own imagination of how it could work. We ended up, you know, making sure that we had our dam for all of our post-custodial archive figured out, but then we ended up actually adding in a lot of like the loan agreements and like using it also as a way to sort of process our loans in a way that I hadn't imagined. So I think it was that process of like being guided through it and having the support that was really helpful in like winning my own like faith in the system so that I could also communicate out to other folks too.
Yeah, and we like we rolled out, we kind of myself and my co-admin determined like what like the priorities of what needs to happen first, and then okay, we're gonna start with these materials because it and you're not gonna get everything in the system all on day one. So it's like we're gonna focus on this batch, and then once that gets to a good place, then we'll move on to the next. And that also where the then we could start reaching out to some of the other area admins and be like, okay, talk to us about these materials. Let us get you set up with the fields and drop downs and controlled vocabulary, and then we'll pass it off to you to upload your stuff. Okay, now they're set up pretty good. Let's roll on to the next one.
I realize that this has gone so quickly. We are towards the end. I don't know if you guys have the time to stay a few minutes longer. If you can, great. If not, completely understand. Milan, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add to that question before I go to the next one.
No, you can go to the next one.
Thank you. Sorry, I appreciate you all staying with us. This has been so fantastic because I really wanted to talk about this integration question. As cultural institutions modernize their digital infrastructure, a DAMS is often needed to work alongside a collections management system, online collection solutions, archive systems, websites, and other internal tools. How did integrations factor into your implementation planning? And what decisions helped your team think beyond just a standalone dams towards more of that kind of connected digital ecosystem?
I'll go quickly so that other folks can share. But really, from the beginning, I knew I wanted something integrated. I knew, again, that I wouldn't have the time to be managing three different systems. So that was part of our reason for going with Terentia, was because everything was integrated into one system and could talk to each other. And so, yeah, it was something that I was like, I would not be able to manage this with having separate systems. It needs to be something that is cohesive. And that was part of our decision making.
We basically just wanted something that could talk to Museum Plus, you all, and our future website, which is done in-house. So it's really just like having all those built-in filters and your guys' search ability. That was really key to us.
Yeah, so for us, we tried to find ways to integrate it into like existing workflows where it, maybe took the place, the system we used to use for marketing photos. Now it's taking this place. We have a few materials that staff are actually required. So we have scientists who work here, they get published. They have to submit their publications. They used to just email those in to like three different people. Now they're required to submit them into Terentia because they also get an incentive. So that helps a little when you're like, if you want to get paid, you have to upload your stuff. But then we also try and make sure that any future integrations that we're asking the question, is there a way for these to work together? And sometimes the answer is going to be no. And sometimes it's yes. So like we are now integrated with our new website. Terentia serves as the back end. We've got an animal encyclopedia. And as we were building out the aquarium and looking at software for that, there were a few times where we were like, oh, can it integrate with the display software or can it integrate with this? And the idea just to get that embedded and be like, every time we're talking about something new, let's talk about can this be the resource for it?
Milan, anything on the vendor side you'd like to add?
We try to make things compatible with everything to make things easy to manage on the dam side or on collection management system. So yeah.
I'm going to prioritize another panel question instead of our last poll, just because I recognize we are out of time and I appreciate you all sticking around with us. So Jason, I know your dams launched, but you're still working in implementation. So this is still kind of for you, but for everybody, now that your dam is launched, how have you been working to keep it from becoming another messy repository? What governance practices, metadata standards, permission structures, or ongoing workflows are you implementing to help sustain, that really important data quality and supporting institutional trust over time?
Oh, go ahead.
We have a governance site, not unlike our training site, where we detail, especially, which I recommend to everyone, your governance documentation as you're going through implementation, just like write everything down. Because there's a reason why you made a decision, but then sometimes when you get in the weeds and you're like, why did we do it this way? Yes, we did it that way for a good reason because we were thoughtful and we talked it out and we thought about future planning and all that kind of stuff. So just I would say write it all down, all those spreadsheets that you're going to work through, keep them. Um, uh, yeah, I think that answered the question, maybe.
Yeah, for us, our main CM is always going to be the main database for everything. So that will always be the center for all of our metadata coming for our collection. So that's never going to change. And some of my staff might not like this, but it is what it is. In terms of the keywords going into Terentia, I have the final say because I want to make sure that it's all spelled correctly, it's proved, so it goes through an approval process before it goes into the system. So that just helps keep the data clean. Not, I'm sure all of us can say I like clean data. Sometimes clean data better than no data. Well, duh. But I don't want a ton of data that's just bad data versus less data that's clean. Anyways, clean data is preferred than just having that's the goal, to have everything that's super clean. The only way to do that is to just limit it and just to have a system in place that says if you want new data in the system, submit it to me, and then we can kind of go from there. And we're already working on workflows for that.
Yeah, we utilize a lot of like workflows for our interns that are doing a lot of the metadata, like creation and entry. And it's a lot of using the Terentia system to create guide rails for that. So, Jamie, I think you were mentioning like all of the drop downs, making sure that we have the controlled vocabulary. So it's not them entering something and making a typo that then messes up the whole system, but it's actually like being able to create the system that allows those guardrails. And I think that has been super helpful. And one of the things we're looking to do with our new archive intern is thinking through what are our, subject terms like right now. We use a Library of Congress, but we also want to have an internal or sort of more local subject term repository that's more relevant to what we're doing. And our goal is actually to share those with other local community-based archives in our region and sort of like strengthen some of that local infrastructure as a whole, because not all of the archives in our region have this infrastructure that we have. So we want to be able to share that. And so that's been really great. And I think being able to have the Terentia system has allowed us to do that because we know we can actually create a controlled vocabulary in a way that we couldn't working just off CSV and Excel sheets. So it's sort of being able to use the system to identify those messy pieces that are still there and remnants, and then finding new solutions that we can, not only use at our institution, but elsewhere and share that knowledge too.
Yeah, we have some fields that we are like tightly controlled on the back end, and we have a suggestion box that, hey, if your term that you're looking for isn't on the list, drop it in the suggestion box and we'll get it added and make sure that it's formatted correctly. And then we do have a few that are a little more open and that people can add to for themselves. People's names are strictly controlled.
Man, it really seems like we're going to have to come back and do another one of these if you guys are game for it, because we have so many questions that have come in that unfortunately we're not going to get to because I want to be respectful of everybody's time today. Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen really quick for contact information for anybody who wants to reach out. This brings a close to today's session, though I really hope it feels like the beginning of a conversation rather than the end of one. A huge, huge, huge thank you to you, Jamie, Audrey, Jason, and Milan, for joining us today and being so open and generous with your insights and experiences, and to everyone for all of your wonderful questions and engagement in the chat and Q&A. If today sparked some thinking about your own damn journey, we'd love to keep that conversation going. We welcome you to book a demo to see Terentia in action, reach out directly to talk through your institution's own specific needs, or sign up for our newsletter to stay connected. All the links have been dropped in the chat. We hope to see you at a future webinar or a conference. Thank you so much for being here today. Take care, everyone. We're going to have to come back for another one of these because this was fantastic. Thank you.